In this video, I will talk about the double entry system. The double entry system is a method of recording transactions in a business. Now, what is a transaction? A transaction is an agreement between a buyer and a seller to exchange goods and services in return for money. A transaction causes changes in assets, liabilities, and capital. The double entry system records changes in these three. How? Well, look, when you record a transaction, you record it in what is called an account, sometimes known as a T account because it is in this form, like a T. It has two sides. The debit side. The debit side is where you record assets, losses, and expenses. And the right side is known as the credit side. This side is where you record revenues, liabilities, profits, and capital. Now, when recording transactions, you should remember this. To increase an asset, we make a debit entry. To decrease an asset, we make a credit entry. To increase a liability or capital account, we make a credit entry. To decrease a liability or capital account, we make a debit entry. For example, consider the transactions of Joe during the first week of January. The first transaction, Joe bought office equipment costing 7,000 kwacha, paying 2,000 deposit by check. The balance was to be paid at the end of March. Now here, when you see a transaction, you need to identify what is going on, which accounts are being affected. There are three accounts which have been affected: the office equipment account, the bank account, and the payables account. And these accounts are recorded in this way. The office equipment account. This is an asset account. Office equipment is an asset. So what you are going to do, since he bought office equipment costing 7,000 and paid 2,000 deposit by check, he bought office equipment for 7,000 but only paid 2,000 by check. So we are going to debit the office equipment account with 2,000 because an asset increased. The office equipment account increased. Now, out of that 7,000, he only paid 2,000. So there is still a balance of 5,000. So again, we are going to debit the office equipment account with 5,000 because there is still a balance of 5,000. And this means that the office equipment account increased by 7,000. Out of that 7,000, he only paid 2,000 kwacha. The other account which has been affected is the bank account. Remember, he paid by check. When you hear paying by check, it means the bank is involved. So he paid by check to the bank using the bank. So we are going to credit the bank account with 2,000 kwacha. Why? Because the bank account is also an asset account. The money at the bank is an asset. Now, that asset reduced by 2,000. And remember, when you reduce an asset, you make a credit entry. So we are going to credit the bank account with 2,000 kwacha while we have debited the office equipment account with 2,000 kwacha. Now remember, he is still owing that 5,000 kwacha. So there is also the payables account. Payables are the same as creditors. The people you owe money, the people Joe owes money. Remember, they sold him the office equipment at 7,000, but he only paid 2,000. So he is still owing them 5,000. This means that he has a liability which has increased by 5,000. And when you increase a liability, you are going to make a credit entry. So we are going to credit the payables account. By the way, the payables account is a liability. It is a liability account. So when you increase the liability, you are going to make a credit entry. That is why we have made a credit entry on the payables account. But we have made a debit entry on the office equipment account because this is an asset which increased by 7,000. Part of that 7,000 is 2,000 which he already paid, and the other part is 5,000 which he has not yet paid. But the office equipment account still has increased by 7,000. So this is how you record these transactions in the accounts. The next transaction. He returned some office equipment to his supplier because it was faulty. Joe had originally been charged 3,000 kwacha for it. So again, let us identify the accounts which are being affected here. The office equipment account is affected. The other account which has been affected is the payables account because the supplier is a payable and the records are recorded in this form. Remember, we have already debited the office equipment account with 7,000 kwacha, part 2,000 kwacha and the other part 5,000 kwacha. So how are we going to record this 3,000 kwacha? Well, since he returned office equipment and office equipment is an asset, then that asset reduced by how much? 3,000 kwacha. And when you reduce an asset, you are going to make a credit entry. So we are going to credit the office equipment account with 3,000 kwacha. And then we are going to debit the payables account. Why are we debiting the payables account? Remember, this is a liability. Now, since we returned office equipment, it means that that liability, the amount that he owes to the payables, reduced by 3,000 kwacha because he returned. And when you reduce a liability, you make a debit entry. That is why we are debiting the payables account. So this is how the accounts must appear according to this transaction. The third transaction. Joe received 8,000 from his receivables. They all paid by check. So which accounts are being affected here? There is the receivables account and the bank account. Now, the other name for receivables are just debtors. Receivables are the people who owe Joe money. The people you owe money are your receivables or your debtors because they are indebted to you. Now, in this case, these debtors, they returned 8,000 kwacha to Joe. And then they paid by check. So the receivables account and the bank account are affected. How are we going to record these transactions? We are going to record them in this way. The receivables is an asset. It is an asset that is something that is owned by the business. Now, since the receivables, they returned the money, then that asset reduced by how much? 8,000. So the receivables account, we are going to credit it because it is an asset. And when you reduce an asset, then you make a credit entry. So in the receivables account, we are going to make a credit entry of 8,000 kwacha. And then in the bank account, remember the bank account is already credited with 2,000 kwacha. But then how are we going to record the 8,000 kwacha? Well, the bank account is also an asset. Now, since these people, they paid by check, they paid money to Joe's account, it means that the bank account increased. That is, the asset, the bank increased. And when you increase an asset, then you make a debit entry. In short, when one account is debited, the corresponding account should be credited. When one account is credited, the corresponding account should be debited. So guys, this is where I end. My advice: practice as many questions as possible. This is very important to know in financial accounting. The double entry system is very important to know in financial accounting because this is where also financial accounting is based on. So you need to know how to record a credit entry and how to record a debit entry. So practice as many questions as possible. This is where I end. Thank you very much for watching.